Carter is a 2022 Korean action film by Byung-gil. Now, I did not know that he directed this film, but his last two films I really enjoyed. Actually, they're the favorites of mine. He did Confession of Murder in 2012, which was like about a serial killer who comes out of hiding on the eve of his of the statute of limitations being finished, so he wants to write a book about it, and it's a really crazy crime thriller action picture. And then also The Villainous in 2017 was about a female assassin who undergoes plastic surgery and then gets revenge on the man who betrayed her. So this one is about Carter. He wakes up in a hotel room with a surgery scar on the back of his head, and a voice starts telling him to do stuff, and he doesn't know why. But then he finds out he has to rescue a hostage and then send her to North Korea. So that's a pretty simplistic plot, but the opening of the movie is very similar to The Villainous. You know, there's a scene where he jumps through a window and he ends up in like a sort of sauna, and he's fighting a whole bunch of guys. And, you know, it's a pretty breathtaking action sequence because it's just so big in scale, and like they got the drone camera hovering all over the place. And this first opening sequence gets your blood pumping. You're like, ooh, this is pretty awesome. And then the plot kicks in and it's really convoluted because apparently he is a North Korean agent who wanted his memory suppressed, so he's doing this mission and he has to rescue this hostage because she is the daughter of a scientist, and she has antibodies that can stop the DMZ virus, which is like this super virus that turns people into infected rage-like beings, that super strength a little bit, and they can use weapons, and they're starting to, you know, overwhelm the North Koreans, so they're working with the South Koreans. So our main character Carter gets thrown into the mix, and this movie is the definition of excessive. If you've ever watched a movie where you're like, whoa, this action sequence is pretty rad, this makes the movie, Carter tries to do that like 6 times, and it really detriments the film because you know, they have like a big action sequence and they'll slow down, have some exposition and a plot. Then they'll have another big action sequence and then another and another. And this movie honestly feels like you're on one of those 3D roller coaster rides. However, it goes on for way too long. And, you know, occasionally they'll throw in some extras that you have to shoot at. And the movie just tries to do too much, you know. Without spoiling it, an example of this would be like you have 2 cops and they're in the police station and they're talking about how they have to go to the stadium. So, you know, a normal movie would just have them cut to the parking lot and they're like walking into the stadium and there's like people with jerseys and flags. They're going to go to the game. But this movie doesn't do that. Instead, they'd have the 2 cops go, let's go. They leave. The camera then is a drone, flies through the window, hovers behind the van. We watch them get in the van. It follows the van for a while. Then it goes through a tunnel. We edit there, and then we have the camera zoom into the back of the van, then zoom out so we can edit that, so we can have them in the parking lot of the stadium, and then it follows them into the stadium. You don't have to do all that, but the movie does that so many times. But sometimes the movie does that and tries to throw in a CGI background that isn't quite finished. And it's really distracting because it looks really bad. There's like a sequence where our protagonist has to zip line into a building, and you could just have him do that, but the camera work wants to, like, you know, make it seamless, so they have like this CGI background and it looks like crap, and then they cut to the real background and you're just like, whoa, why did you have to do that? Was that necessary? But apparently it is, and the movie does that like 30 times. And the movie also has a lot of action, but it gets to the point where it becomes mind-numbing, you know? You can only watch an action hero kill like 20 people with amazing gun skills and never get hurt so many times before it gets boring, right? And this movie has an opening sequence in the sauna, and then he's running around fighting a couple agents. Then he's in a abandoned CIA center, so that's, what is that, 3? And then after that, he's on a plane. There's an amazing plane sequence that was really good. That was filmed for real, I think, and they CGI'd the background. See, when you CGI the background, it doesn't matter if you can't tell, but then they literally fall into another action sequence. They literally fall into another action sequence. It's really crazy how like over the top this movie is. And then they get onto a train and there's like helicopters and stuff, and there's like 2 giant trucks of North Korean soldiers. He's like killing like 500 people in a movie. It just becomes really, really over excessive and mind numbing. It feels like overkill. if you thought very similar to Hardcore Henry that came out. That movie was done pretty much on a GoPro, but that movie was mostly stunt work, so most of the stuff happening around Henry was real. If Henry all of a sudden started fighting like giant CGI lizards that looked like PS3 games, it would be really distracting. This movie tries to do that too. Like Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol had the helicopter chase. If you tried to do that for the whole movie, it would get really boring, wouldn't it? You could only take so much like set pieces, and the movie is really excessive in terms of everything else. Like the storyline, it's half-baked because it's about like zombies, it's about like traitors, it's about like a coup, it's about like switching sides, it's about like running out of time. And then there's also it's like over 2 hours long. It's like almost 2.5 hours long. The main character commits a very good physical performance, I'll give him that. But the rest of the movie I couldn't care anything about. Like they throw in a couple of American actors in there too. They have nothing to do really. They just there to be like, hey, you're actually like a this or something, and then like they're just gone for the rest of the movie. There's no point in them being there at all really. And overall, Carter is an interesting experiment. I understand like the director, he hasn't done a movie for like almost 5 years, but this definitely was not a return to form. This was the definition of like just doing way too much. So I give Carter a 2 out of 10.